Welcome, everyone. This is Work Made Human. I'm Nichole Mendez, Director of Talent Acquisition here at BAM.
And I'm Jill Veglahn, Head of People at BAM. And with us today, coming from New York, is Dani Herrera, Talent and DEI Consultant, Fractional Leader, Trainer and Speaker, all the things. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. As I've mentioned to you before, I've heard you speak a bunch of times on LinkedIn. So I'm personally biased and really excited that you're here. Jumping into things first, we always really love to start off with the human story behind the work. You've spent, I want to say, over 17 years in talent operations, recruitment, HR, DEI, all the things within people operations, essentially, before you went off and launched your own consultancy. So looking back, was there one specific aha moment or maybe many micro moments where you just thought to yourself, the way we work isn't working for everyone?
Yeah. Funnily enough, like the story that comes to mind is from before my time in all of the things talent. And I think it's the moment that kind of made me realize that I could make potentially a change in the way that we do things at work. So my very first job, corporate job between a million air quotes, was at a call center. I used to do tech support for dial-up internet. That's how old I am. And it was a grueling job. Like I was taking calls like one right after the other for almost an hour straight. And at that time I was 18, 19 years old. I was like fresh out of school. And one day I was taking a call, and again, this was back home in Argentina. All of the calls were in English because it was like for the American market. And I got a call from a deaf customer. And the way that it worked was the deaf customer would relay information to a translator or an interpreter in text. I don't really know how that worked at that time. Maybe the technology has changed. And then the interpreter would relay the information over to me, and then we would do the same thing as I would pass on the information to this person, so they would relay it to the deaf customer. And the tricky part about that is if you know anyone that has ever worked at a call center, especially at the time, we had a very limited amount of time that we were allowed to spend with each customer. Like we couldn't spend as much time as we wanted. I think that at the time was anything about like 8 to 10 minutes, which of course was not going to work in this situation, right? Because every single interaction, like even asking for their name and triple checking their account information, was going to take longer. So I remember spending about like half an hour with this customer, and we were honestly just getting started to understand what the problem was. And my supervisor came along and they asked me like why I was taking so long, and they kind of pushed me to close the call, to end it. Like no matter if the issue was resolved or not. And it's been over 20 years and I'm still thinking about that interaction. And I'm 100% sure that that's one of the reasons why I started doing the work that I started to do later on, because I very quickly realized that the way that we do things, they don't necessarily work for everybody. And I'm still thinking about that person because at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure that they had to call back to that call center and they had to go through the same thing all over again. And I'm pretty sure that the next person would hang up on them too. So my goal, what I learned there is, again, I wanted to make work and all of the things as inclusive and as equitable as we potentially can make it. So that was my aha moment, completely outside of HR, but kind of informed the work that I do.
Yeah, I think we learned there's not necessarily one moment. There's so many moments. And I find myself constantly thinking about lately, again, unrelated, but with parking meters and everything shifting, at least by me, like on the phone. And I've seen seniors struggle with how to pay for their meter. Those things happen across teams, right? Within work in so many ways. And, the opportunities will present themselves for us to figure it out.
Hopefully.
Leaning into that, we see the news week after week after week, it feels like, where we're just in a moment where many organizations across the board, it just feels like they're pulling away from DEI, at least publicly. Having the opportunity to work with different teams and different organizations of different sizes, from your perspective, do you feel like there's anything that's changing just in name versus what's actually changing behind the scenes?
So yes and no. There are certain things that are absolutely changing only by name. Many companies are, reshaping or renaming their DEI departments, and they're now calling it people and culture or people engagement, or, in many ways, shapes and forms like engagement or anything like that. But the work remains the same, because at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is make the workplace work for as many people as possible. That's always been the goal. With that said, what I'm also seeing is, which we are seeing across the board for many other talent related things or people related things, of course, budget cuts across the board, and specifically in anything related to talent development and talent engagement, that has been very, very hard. And the other thing that I'm noticing is that the companies that were truly not really serious about DEI at all were probably the first ones, to jump ship. And at the end of the day, at least for me, those are probably the companies that I'm not necessarily interested in working with, because I know that the desire to make things better is not there. And if that's not there, there is absolutely nothing that I can do to help. Right. But with that said, many companies are still doing this work. They're maybe reshaping things. They're being a little bit more intentional in terms of the type of work that they are doing. They're focusing a little bit more on talent development or career development for their employees, which again, at the end of the day, it's part of DEI work. I haven't seen so much, at least this year, companies leaning a little bit towards, like longer strategies. They're taking things a little bit more on the shorter term, which also makes sense, right? Because things are changing so quickly, not only with all of the things that are happening, but with AI making all of the changes pretty much every single day, companies are focusing a little bit more on the shorter term than necessarily putting together, I don't know, like a DI strategy for the next 5 years. So those are, like the main things or the main changes that I've been noticing.
I want to touch on what you just said there. I'm going to ask my question in a second, but I just first have to acknowledge, this is so unrelated, but your background, the books, the Bob, I could not ask. Like, that's so beautiful and intentional. Like, what can you?
I appreciate that. Yeah, of course. So I'm a nerd of all things, books and pop culture. So the way, or all of the things that you see here are pretty much like all of my books that kind of inform my work. They're kind of divided on topic. I have, books on feminism, the LGBTQ community, accessibility and disability over there, and all of the things. And then the way that I try to do things, because again, I'm a nerd and I love it, is I have like all of these like Pop Funko figurines. And the way that I like to place them is kind of related to the topic of the books. So my LGBT books right here, they have, like the LGBTQ icons. For feminism, we have Britney Spears over here. For inclusive language, I have Moya Rose from Schitt's Creek. So everything is kind of related.
Oh my God, that's so great, Dani.
I love that you.
I was like, there's so a story there, and we're talking about, BAM we're storytellers, and like there is a story there, and so many stories there. Oh
yeah. I'm so happy you asked, because sometimes I like to blur my background because I don't necessarily know like if people are gonna like it or not. But this is who I am at the end of the day. So there we go.
It's so very cool. Okay, thank you for sharing. I needed to know.
Yeah, of course.
If anyone's watching, we all needed to know. I know I'm not the only one curious about that. Okay, so when you're talking about fields as highly technical and historically gatekept as astrophysics or deep tech, how do you convince rigid, data-driven leaders that things like emotional intelligence and inclusive design are just as critical as technical metrics?
Yeah. So there are two ways that I approach it. The first one is trying to use inclusive language. And what I mean inclusive language, I'm not talking about, like, yes, of course, gender inclusive, but I'm meaning something that the other person will understand. And the way that I like to explain workplace culture and equity and inclusion is comparing it to a computer, which at the end of the day is language that, like tech savvy people usually are familiar with. So, one of the ways that I go about it is I like to say that the company as a whole is your computer, right? Is your hardware. And then every single department that you have inside of your company, finance, HR, marketing, tech, all of those things, those are the applications. Now, hardware and applications, they work separately, but you need something to make everything run together, and that is workplace culture. And workplace culture is built by inclusion and equity, and that is your software. You cannot make a company run without your software, right? You could be investing all of the money that you potentially have in more tech, more leaders, more HR, less HR, more of the things. You could be updating your apps, but without the software making your computer run, it's gonna fail at some point. So that is one way that I like to explain it.
Yeah.
Once we understand where we are, then we can go deeper into the data. And the way that I like to dive a little bit more into numbers and explain why this is important is, at the end of the day, emotional intelligence, equity, inclusion, they all impact the way that we all work together, right? The way that we communicate, the way that we give feedback, the way that we receive feedback, the way that we build our products, the way that we communicate with our clients, the way that we build the ads that we are putting out there. Without it, these things don't necessarily work if we don't know how to talk to each other, if we don't know how to respect each other, if we don't have the emotional intelligence to understand that I'm hurting somebody else.
Yeah.
The product that we are going to build is probably also going to cause harm. So that's usually how I like to explain it. And then usually I like to show them what happens whenever you have like very emotionally intelligent leaders. Your talent tends to stay more.
Yeah.
And I like to explain the correlation between motivation, engagement, and productivity. And once they kind of see all of these things click together, they start paying a little bit more attention. Now, as we were talking about before, if I'm faced with a manager who truly doesn't really care about any of this, at least I will never be able to change their mind. I am pretty sure that there are other DEI or culture professionals out there that excel in that piece. I am not that person. We need to at least work from the same foundation that we care about people and that we want to make this better. If that piece is not there, I am not the person for them.
No, totally. And that's spoken like someone who maybe you've been there where you're like, okay, I can maybe try to convince these people, but you learn at a certain point, no, if it's not there, you're like, it's not my job. And I really just want to work with the people who get it and are willing or open. Yeah.
And I've had to do that in the past. And that's also, like the nice thing of being, like my own agent. Because I get to say no sometimes. Fortunately enough, I haven't had to do that enough, but I know that it's an option that I have. Because there is one thing that I will not do is go in and cause any more harm intentionally, right? Because we know that performative actions at the end of the day, they cause more harm. And I do not want to be part of it. So yeah.
Absolutely. That, I mean, I would say, and this is going to lead into what I'd like to ask you next, but I would say that sounds very clearly a boundary, a boundary that you have set for yourself. You understand it. There's clarity, makes it easy to make decisions. Yeah.
Yes. 100%. Yeah.
You shared a profound lesson about being a woman leader that many people mistake professional boundaries, for example, this one we just talked about, but within workplace, right? For punishment rather than what they really are, which is an act of self-respect, mutual respect. So why is it so hard, specifically corporate cultures, for them to accept boundaries from historically excluded leaders like women? And how do you coach people to like hold these lines, these boundaries?
So there is no easy answer to that one. And we know that corporate culture, at least here in the United States, it's very, or yeah, very informed in what we understand as white supremacist culture, right? So it is really hard whenever we are trying to have these conversations. And again, you have a leader or a manager or a colleague who doesn't want to get it, who is not interested in listening or learning. So there is obviously a disconnect from the get-go. So that is one of the reasons why it is difficult. But it's difficult as a system, right? Like, yes, of course, you might get like one individual or many individuals who are having a difficult time with it, but the system allows for those interactions to happen. And sometimes, it kind of, like encourages those interactions to happen. So the way that I coach people, I am also very careful with the pieces of advice that I share, because even saying that we need to have boundaries or we need to push our boundaries, that actually comes from a very privileged point of view. That is something that I can do today, that again, I am kind of outside of the corporate world. Yes, I work in corporate, but I'm not a full-time employee. It's not necessarily something that I was always able to do when I was working in-house, because again, I'm a Latina woman, I'm an immigrant. My visa was in jeopardy like pretty much every single day. So I had to adapt and adjust and accommodate to the norms that were available to me, even if I like them or not. So whenever I talk about like coaching or mentoring other women, especially women of color or from historically excluded communities, is I want to make sure that they fully know and they fully understand what is actually doable and available for them without risking their livelihood sometimes. Because especially today, that's not something that we can all do. It's not something that we can afford, right? So if it is something that you feel comfortable doing, that is your truth, as I've been saying myself, like this is what I do and what I don't do. Yes, please go ahead and do it. There are ways to do it that is, still respectful and that we will have a very meaningful conversation about it. But if we are coming from a place that I know that the moment that I said something, my manager is going to give me a negative performance review, or they might let me go and I will lose my visa and I will need to go back to my country of origin, the piece of advice that I would give them is completely different. So I don't necessarily like to be, like a general piece of advice. I like to understand what the situation is a little bit better before we even talk about what's doable or not for that person.
I mean, of course, but of course you would say that. Of course you would. That is equitable, that is inclusive, like that. Yeah.
I will say, Jill, though, that reminds me so much. And I hope I've said this to you, but it's not lost on me that I've been welcomed into conversations and rooms and like championed with you being my direct manager and just Beck also being the CEO. Workplaces before, I didn't necessarily always have that, right, in my back pocket. So it is, we've talked about this too, like bringing your chosen self to work versus bringing your full self to work, having to decide what pieces of you.
100%. And that's also why I don't necessarily love the bring yourself to work kind of motto, which was like very popular a couple of years ago. It's still kind of popular, in workplace culture. I think that as an ideal, yes, amazing. Let's work towards it. But in many cases can actually be performative, right? Because we have an idea and an ideal of what the ideal employee is, and whomever is a little bit outside of it for whatever reason, we are going to think about them and we are going to talk to them and we are going to give them performance reviews in a completely different way than we would do to the ideal. So that is also one of like the very popular things in workplace culture that I'm like, maybe let's look into it first before we communicate that.
Yeah. So it sounds like pressure's on for direct managers, for leadership, right? It's it's give and take in that regard. Speaking on that, but also bringing in AI, because we know that conversation is everywhere. All over LinkedIn, all over the news, literally everywhere. And I keep reading about how recent workforce data is now showing that just really a growing number of Gen Z, even millennials, but especially Gen Z and younger, workers are now starting to prefer and turn to AI tools, whether it's Gemini or ChatGPT, so on and so forth, from everything to career advice to guidance, literally constructive feedback in their work. Instead of turning to their human managers. So to me, it feels like the driving force behind this is incredibly human, because they're finding AI to be just there, available 24/7, objective. It wants to kind of champion you, right, and give you the answer you're looking for. And it's just non-judgmental. It's taking away performance anxiety and just like this fear of maybe saying the wrong thing or feeling stupid in front of your manager or team. So what do you think this tells us about the current state of just work culture, and what's your advice to human managers who are now able to really like reflect and think about how they can compete, so to speak, with AI that's just always there, always patient and objective, essentially?
So a couple of things. I do believe, as you were saying, that people are turning more into AI for, like very quick feedback, because again, as you were saying, it's available, it's there, it's available, it's gonna respond to you in a couple of seconds, which is not always possible for human managers. Like you might have the best manager in the universe, but they have other things going on, and they might not be able to give you, like the feedback or the piece of advice that you're looking for so quickly. So with that said, and because of the work that I do, I'm also a little bit worried. Well, actually very worried. I shouldn't minimize it. Because we tend to think about AI as this objective kind of tool, when that's not necessarily true in many cases, right? We know that the data was biased. We know that it's been trained on all of the things on the internet. We know that things on the internet, we have amazing resources on the internet, but we also have some trash on the internet, right? So I don't see it as, like the overarching truth. I mean, it's definitely a tool to use and to, take into consideration, especially when we are looking for something like, again, like very quick, or let's double check something. But I'm also a little bit worried because, again, it's giving you feedback based on your input, right? So if you're asking a question and you are posing the question from your own biased point of view, the answer that you might get might not necessarily be the answer that you need to hear. And I'm mostly thinking about feedback and, conversations with somebody else. Now, I'm not saying that a human being will always give you a perfect answer every single time, but they might have a different point of view on things, or they might have, like feedback and opinions from other people, or they might actually see you working or interacting or whatever that is. So as a tool, yes, 100%. I use it every single day. I would be lying if I didn't. But I also want to be cautious in terms of like, this is, like the tool that's going to save us from all of our maladies and feedback and management, because it's not that. It's really not that.
No, AI is AI. It's not a human.
AI is AI. It's not human. For some things, it is incredibly helpful and useful. For some other things, I usually advise, okay, let's take it a little bit slower and see what we can take from whatever AI is giving you, and what else can we add to this output to make it work for this particular situation.
I want to be mindful of time, Nichole, and if you wanted to do the lightning round, I'm not sure if you wanted to jump into that because we got 2 minutes. What do you think?
Okay. Dani,
are you ready?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. So lightning round, 10, 15 seconds max. You don't have to explain it unless you want to. We'll do like 6 or 7 questions, something like that. So what is your absolute go-to non-work activity when you just need to shut your brain off?
Read, as you can see.
Biggest LinkedIn pet peeve?
Oh, I don't like
There's
when
many.
people tag other people they don't know just to get engagement.
Worst hiring advice on the internet?
The ATS is going to reject your resume.
Most overrated leadership skill?
Overrated?
Oh, sorry. Word, not skill.
Sorry, overrated what?
Most overrated leadership buzzword?
Oh, productivity.
That's a good one. Most underrated leadership skill?
Communication.
And let's say remote, hybrid, or in office. That's a fun one.
Remote, 100%. Always.
We agree.
Amen. Preaching to the choir. Literally.
Listen, ideally it should be, like whatever works for everybody, because a lot of people really need or enjoy going into an office, and we shouldn't take that away from them. I am not a fan of return to office mandates.
Yeah. Agreed. Dani, it has been lovely getting to have you here. Work Made Human, learning a little bit about you from the books behind you and the pop culture icons that are extremely inclusive. Of course they are. Thank you for sharing that with us. Again, this is Dani Herrera, culture, DEI and talent consultant, speaker, facilitator, and trainer. We have one final question. What gives you hope about the future of work?
So the younger generation and the millennial generation give me a lot of hope, because we've been fighting for a very long time against, like the outdated practices of work. And especially Gen Z is being like very clear on their boundaries and the things that they will not tolerate. So that gives me a lot of hope, honestly.
I totally agree. I say it all the time. Like, I totally agree. I'm so grateful for the younger generations and what they are refusing to accept. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. We did it, so they don't have to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dani, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.